examples of things that that you may want to actually go ahead and bite the bullet and pay for. The product page, it's kind of amazing, and I do a lot of site critiques, and there's an entire ecosystem set up to help people set up these niche dropship companies, but the ones who succeed are the ones who make an effort to bring value to their store and to the people who hit their site. If all you see is a catalog of products, then it's like, okay, so why do I want to buy this from you? What, you know, I might as well just go price shop this. Whereas if you can get a little more compelling and answer all their questions in one visit, you stand a lot better chance, even if they go shopping, of instilling the level of confidence and trust that help you know, you win over your competition. So the other issue is that if you answer their questions up front, now granted, marketing rule number one in e-commerce is people don't read until the day they want that information. But you can potentially lower return rates, and of course unique content helps you do better with SEO, because otherwise Google will automatically go to the site that has the most authority, that's got that duplicate content or the source. So I thought it would be kind of cool to take a look at 3 very different pages. Let's see, is this pulling it up? It is. So here we go. It's not wanting to go. I can get it. It's just me.
Got it.
All right. So Apple trendsetter, where everybody else, like, nobody follow Amazon's because it works for them, it works for nobody. But when it comes to setting trends, you want to know what colors are in, what styles are in. Apple is certainly a trendsetter. Just keep in mind that they have automatic brand trust. And if you aren't a well-known brand, you don't have that yet. So there are things that they can do that none of us will ever get away with. And I mean, again, just a really pretty, they've got the production video. And for a single product, it's kind of hard to argue that this page is beautiful. It just is. Another one, and this is actually a new store and a new brand. This was, one of these days Tracy's going to see me talking so well about her store. Where did my mouse go here? All right, there's my mouse. So this is actually a brand new store, built with the woman who is the editor for all the content and tells people how to market on eCommerce's website. So she took everything she knows, worked with the best people. She has 3 products on site, they're all pillows, and built this very rich, this is custom coded, amazing page.
WordPress, is it?
Nope, that's all on BigCommerce. It isn't even a WordPress front end. This is, because I thought she had used the new WordPress plugin. This is actually capable on the store front. So, and then the third one, because I knew that one was really flashy, but neither of these look like your typical page. One of my other favorite sources for how to do things well is Chewy's. And it was very hard to look at this site today and not buy anything. So this is more typical of a page. The layout may be a little bit non-standard, but basically you've got great pictures, you've got access to a video, you know what your options are, you can see your options if you want a blue one or a pink one, you've got an add to cart button. This is something we'll talk about later. There's pros and cons to doing that. And then of course your basic data. It's a nice long page, it answers all their questions, and then they actually have an entire section on the bottom for branding, and that would be kind of expensive for a lot of stores to implement. But let's see here. Back here and shrink that. Okay. So let me go back over here and click. All right. So what does a product, let's start with the basics. What's a good product page need? It needs great visuals. if you don't have good photos, forget it, because that's how everybody shops. Even on dating sites, you have an ugly photo, you're just not gonna get very lucky. And you can take that term any way you want. A great unique product description. Again, that's all about answering your customers' questions. Something really important, sell benefits over features. When you list a feature, think about why that's good for the customer. It's the benefit that's really a key. Social proof. Yes, sir.
I'll back up a little bit to great visuals. We've had some clients that have like really high-end products, and depending on your product, I think it's worth spending the money on a proper photo shoot. Like one of them sells gift baskets. I was like, you should go rent out a room like this and have like, you know, maybe the city skyline in the background, because she was like very insistent on having the Austin City skyline in the background. Austin's part of the name of this business. And, you know, just staging all that, you get people enjoying the baskets, having some wine, whatever it is. You know, there's another client where they were selling like sheets that cost like $2,000 or $3,000, and then they wanted to know if we could do like a color overlay in Photoshop or something to like fake it. And I'm like, no, you need to reset that bed every time, have a professional photographer do this, and you know, for as much as you're selling, like, you know, it's worth that kind of investment.
How many product shots do you think there should be for each product on the detail?
I think that's gonna depend on the product.
Yeah.
What do you think is a good range then?
Well, I mean, if you were talking about a shirt, you know, first of all, you typically want, and there's actually a little, in fact, let me move forward because I have a section on visuals, and Dante is obviously gonna ask it. Social proof, that's product reviews typically. And then of course a highly visible buy button. There's been this real big trend lately to set up sites that are 100% black and white. It is a very clean look, but you probably want your buy button to stand out on the page, because that's what you're telling your customer to do, is go ahead and buy it. Now we're back to visuals. So current trend is for larger images. The trick there is you want to make sure that you have to balance file size, because if you have, to your question about how many images, you can put in a dozen images, but it's going to slow the heck out of your site. What you probably want more if you're going to do something like a massive photo gallery, and I saw a site that did this the other day. There's apps you can install so they'll control the load time and not try to load 15 images at once. But typically most shopping carts these days have the ability to zoom in on the image, so you can get away with 800 to 1200 pixels. We recommend you either go square, or that if you're using rectangles, the aspect ratio is the same, because otherwise on your category pages you're going to do this and it's going to look really sloppy. If you're selling on any of the marketplaces, you need a standard white background image. Beyond that, full color images are awesome. The item in use is great. You know, this shirt sitting white's great, but seeing it on a body is you know, a lot more helpful, or you know, pairing it with a pair of jeans or whatever. So think about that. And videos. If you've got the video, use it. If it's not your product and your manufacturer has great YouTube videos, they're very easy to embed. And again, it just kind of goes to the trend that people are more visual. So this is kind of funny when we talk about detail and perspective and things. There was actually a better example of this, but this one I pulled off of BuzzFeed. So she bought this thing on Amazon or on some website, and she thought it was a really good deal. And she obviously didn't think too carefully about what kind of chair she'd get for $5. But there was nothing here that said it was an inch tall.
Yeah, I love seeing, like on BuzzFeed, or like the little tiny rug or something.
Yeah, so if you were selling miniature doll chairs, you probably want some kind of a perspective photo.
The returns must be really high on that product.
In what it is that we do, we end up, because we sell technical products, and these are things that people need to have some understanding of scale. So I was going to mention that it's also nice to, like you said, someone wearing the shirt, but we'll have a speakerphone that has, you know, Zoom on it. And people are like, how big is it? And, you know, is it going to take up the entire tabletop? So we use product shots from manufacturers, and often if you're selling something that a manufacturer makes, you can get their high-res imagery from them instead of just Google searching it.
Oh, from a licensing standpoint as well. You don't want to just swipe other people's images. You can get in trouble for that. If you've ever gotten a cease and desist from Getty Image, it comes with a price tag. The last time I got one of those, they wanted $90,000. Fortunately, they were wrong.
Well,
Do you
And
think
also
the merchant purposefully did that?
No, it actually said miniature, and somebody just missed it.
what's your phone off for?
Well, I can stop and go turn off my phone.
The other thing is like, you know, in the used electronic industry, like the eBay stores competing against each other, so we were working with Techzilla, and they took all the original photos, and so they were able to go to all their competitors who were stealing their photos and call eBay and have their store shut down, at least temporarily. And so you don't want to be in that position, you know, but we were in it to win it. You know, we quadrupled their revenue, so I don't care. You know,
I was gonna say
Quick question about that. So we work with, this store they sell apparel and t-shirts and primarily on Etsy. And constantly, probably once every month or two, people will steal their images. And then they go through like the Etsy protocol of like, okay, this clearly came from our store. Is there anything that you would suggest to combat that?
Watermarks?
watermark it.
Put your watermark, and then we've talked about that a little, but do you think that has a negative, I guess, adverse effect on the customers viewing it, or just keep it really small and in the corner?
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not interrupting the product itself,
Yeah.
as long as you can still clearly see the product, I don't think you should put like a giant watermark over the whole thing.
Right, but then it's
What
like,
did you
if
guys
it
do?
is,
How did you know they were your images versus, and how could you prove that
You
they
can
were
embed
yours?
it into the code, right?
Well,
So I was curious.
one, it was watermarked, and two, we had all the original high-res photos, because, yeah, they were taking
There's-
these with a light box and all of that, so we were able to like prove to eBay, like, hey, here's a 10 meg version of this that only we would have.
Right, I mean, you could watermark it in a way that's not
There's
visible.
there's
You
micro
can
data
watermark
in
it
every
white.
image too.
And also, most pictures have EXIF data, and people don't even know that.
Yeah,
And that-
but sometimes that can get cleaned out.
Yeah.
You know, if it's going through a CDN and reproduced and copied, they may not copy that except data with it. And so I don't really count on that.
There are
You can use
spiders.
pixel pattern codes,
Yeah.
so if you create a pixel pattern, right, it's undetectable to the eye, but to code, you can detect pixel pattern in that pixel, and they're not gonna find that.
There are services that will hunt that out. I don't know what they cost, but I know all the big manufacturers use them, and certainly Getty does.
I think for that example, it's less about like actually proving, just because it was so clear at the end of the day, but more about just like prohibiting that from reoccurring, like on and on, but.
All you can do is crawl for it, ultimately. There was, my daughter bought something off of Kickstarter called a Bristly or something. It's like a doggy toothbrush shaped like a toy. And there's a million knockoffs, and what actually shows up isn't even the same product, but the images all these guys use are the original images. And I'm sure it's hurt their business because it's an expensive product and the knockoffs aren't. So, the other thing you want is social proof. So this can be basic product reviews. These days, the emphasis on photos and videos is getting, especially for B2C, I don't know if that matters to B2B. You know your clients well enough to know whether or not that would be helpful.
They love videos of people talking about standing over, touching the product, trade shows, videos, product videos, that sort of stuff.
That's awesome. Then we may want to look at one of the review platforms that lets you, you can just offer incentives to get customers to give you your videos. They give you rights. You can distribute it anywhere, including on your social media.
And then reviews as well, people do care a bit about, but I think in B2B, they're gonna care less
Right.
because essentially what we're doing is that we're gonna have less than 50 SKUs entirely, so we're not doing, we're not telling
Right.
people, here's a million things, pick, and then they're sorting by, because on Amazon, you're sorting by, you're trying to figure out what do people like the most.
Right.
And here, we've already done that hard work, so the reviews are almost redundant.
Right, right. And then the other thing that you can build in alone or with some of the review platforms are question and answers. And that all of this user-generated content can also help your SEO. One of the big differences, though, is some of the free platforms that allow you to include reviews. They don't feed the little stars to Google search results, and people do like things with 4 or 5 stars. It also makes you stand out on a page that's all black and white. Although these days it looks like Google is increasingly going to taking over all that space. So some of the things you'll find on sites that may or may not be good, and you either have to take a bet or you have to wait till you have enough traffic to do genuine A/B testing. But upsells, and Carrie and I were talking about this, you may actually want that because some of your items require other pieces to work, especially for your components. So you may want to give people who buy a phone the option to buy the cables and things that connect to it. And that's what this, when upsells are done, or I should sell, yeah, they call these upsells, but the related products thing, I'm not a big fan of it unless it genuinely enhances the purchase being made on that page. When it points to competitive products, it just confuses customers. Same with cross-sells. That seems to be helpful on clothing sites because they might be looking at this blouse, but they might be looking at that blouse. But there was a company I used to work with that had invested their entire thing in building pages that were incredibly SEO optimized and conversion rate optimized. And they killed all of this because your focus is on the buy button. Anything else that draws their eye or encourages them to click off the page reduces the odds you'll ever make that sale. So, like I said, for some stores, these are a great idea. For other stores, they're a bad idea. And until you got enough mass to test, you just take a bet and kind of watch. So just be aware that just because everybody does it, it's like the little thing that's popping out now on some stores that says, Joe Smith in Topeka just bought, you know, those are all fake, by the way. So
I find those really distracting too. It's like, it's drawing your attention away from what you're
we have one customer using it and he swears that it's helpful, but his sales volume would not indicate that. So anyway.
They creep me out a little bit, because I'm just like, they're broadcasting my shopping data to just complete strangers. Like, that's what it feels like anyway, even, you know, you don't know that it's fake, which is the idea that you're not supposed to know that it's fake.
Right.
You know, it feels like an invasion of privacy that, you know.
So it's
So-
like a laugh track on a comedy TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time to laugh. It's time to laugh.
Yep, your show. Talk about HTML, dude.
Yeah, HTML's cool. You should use it. We didn't exactly coordinate as well as we should have beforehand.
Well, you-
What do you want me to get into?
Well, so, I mean, I guess I can talk about some of this,
Okay.
and then Dante can answer some of your fun questions about how to do specific things. Would that be better?
Sure.
Okay, so header tags. Do you remember in high school or college English where you had to write outlines before you wrote your paper? And your main emphasis, most important thing was your Roman numeral #1, and then anything that supported Roman numeral #1 went under was either a 2, I mean not a 2, but it would be indented, and then you would go down here. So that's exactly how header tags work on a page. They're designed to tell, they're not just creating a visual variation, which is usually set by your theme, although you can go in and custom code those. This is assuming you've already set styles for all of that. But your most important thing on your product page is generally your product name. And most templates will set that automatically. You only want one H1 per page. This is an SEO factor. So make sure everything else is a 2, 3, or 4, and prioritize your content based on its level of importance in terms of supporting the message above it.
Yeah, I just want to underscore that. Like, if you use like any SEO tool, like that's one of the things that comes up like as a hard error is like you have more than H1 tag. Like you really want to keep that just to one. But sometimes people out of laziness they'll use more than one H1 tag somewhere later in the content. They're like, well, I want this exact same font and size and weight, and they use it for styling purposes. But you really don't want to do that. You're better off creating a class called H1 or heading 1 or whatever, and then styling it that way. Because that H1 does serve a specific purpose.
Or in a
SEO.
pinch, you highlight the H1 content or the H2 content and say, make the font bigger, or make it purple. You can override whatever stock styles are in your store. I do use color carefully, because too much is pretty distracting. Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you have a recommendation of a tool or a site that evaluates the page and then gives you feedback based upon a set of rules that you're describing?
So I'm passionately in love and daily use SEMrush over there's a number of really good tools. That said, it helps to understand how to interpret it because it's designed to produce a report I could hand to you that says you need to pay me a lot of money to fix your store. Not everything on that list is important or even fixable, depending on your cart and your platform.
Do you know of any tools that follow up with that report to actually go in and then auto-generate the code and fix the code for you?
I don't, and I'm not sure there's any incentive for anybody to make that, although you probably could. There's a lot of small store owners that would love that. Again, I think the problem is that anything that removes the human judgment is not gonna produce a perfect result.
Talk about the 80-20 rule. So you make stupid mistakes. So you do the analysis, and for $5, I'll fix your page for the stupid things.
There may be somebody offshore that's doing it, because there are certainly cheap vendors selling services.
And you would think these like template designers would take all this into account, but they don't. I mean, I've seen on some templates they use the H1 tag multiple times, and you're like, why? And so, you know, it's you still want to like verify all that stuff, you know.
And especially some of these page builders are a mess, but most of the time when I see mistakes here, it's because somebody copied and pasted code off another page. They just, because that's the thing with a lot of these WYSIWYGs, if you can copy just the text, like let's say this was a page and you go in and you just, you know, copy and then paste, all the HTML behind it will follow, and sometimes that's a mess.
Well, I find the problem is that when you get into the main players, the big guys, the code is JavaScript driven, right?
Mhm.
So when you look at the page, you're not gonna decipher it. You're not gonna figure it out because it's auto-dynamic and it's all customized and it looks like a mess, but it's extremely sophisticated and very effective. So,
Yeah.
and it's actually built so that screen scrapers get confused and can't work
Yeah.
against it.
Yeah, no, the big guys get to play all kinds of fun games. A couple of handy ones that you don't usually see on your WYSIWYG. The horizontal rule is the line that goes across the page, and that's simply this little tag in between the end of one paragraph and the next. If you want to style it, that's a more sophisticated, like make it a different size or color. That requires a little CSS. A line break, so if you've ever wondered how, on HTML, if you're on the front of a WYSIWYG, which by the way is the fancy name for a screen editor, you'll notice if you hit enter, there's always a space between the lines. That's because it generally sets a new paragraph. If you just want your lines to look like this, like the return address on an envelope, then you can shift enter and it will generally insert a break code, but you can also insert that in the back. And I will make the slides available. I found a free HTML editor that's online for those of you who don't want to pay for a tool. That one looked pretty good. Embedding images. This is a fun one. So I do this all the time because I find a lot of times in written descriptions, you know, for example, you were talking about the video conferencing software. Something that might be really helpful would be an image that shows the little console and then a screen and then a little direction on, you know, the size, the max size it's going to produce and how far it needs to be away from the screen. At one of our events, I borrowed a projector and found out it had to be about this close to be useful. So that would have been helpful to know in advance. Fortunately, I didn't pay for it, so I could take it back. But
one of the things that we get asked about a lot is this the right thing? Okay, great, that's great. Is this the right thing for my room? Because my room is this size. And one of the things that we have to do that's gonna be labor intensive is figure out a way to indicate room sizes and what works for what.
yeah,
Just like that, just like you were saying, embedding an image that shows how does this connect to your television? How does it connect to the table? And how does this work in relation to space? What's good for what? Some people are like, well, I've got an Apple TV, so why can't I just put them in all 60 conference rooms? You could do that, and then you'll have 60 Apple TVs showing up on all of your Macs and
Oh.
PCs.
okay.
trying to educate people,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of that is gonna be done through writing, but people don't read. Some of it is just gonna be real simple stuff like an Apple TV with a line through it. No, bad, don't do that. You're a big pants company, you don't use Comic Sans, you don't use an Apple television.
I should have done this all in Comic Sans. So, if you're going to center an image, one of the problems is most of us are designing our pages on a desktop. And a lot of times they don't translate real well to the mobile. And your mobile experience is almost more important than the desktop, at least for the consumer market. Most sites are getting half or better of their traffic on a phone. So you need to take into account and certainly double check what it looks like on a phone. So I have found that if you're trying to what they call float, which is text with an image perhaps wrapped around it or off to the right or the left, the maximum image size width I can put in there and know it will float okay is 300 pixels. So that's why when I say if you're going to float it, try to keep it under 300 pixels. I usually add a little padding on the sides, and again, if you're inserting the image, you'll probably get an option to insert those fields. If you don't, they can be entered like this. So this code says float the image on the right, give it this margin, and the rest of it's just stuff. But anyway, but then I also learned the hard way that with narrow images, sometimes when I think I've laid things out in really cool blocks, I was doing an About Us page where there was a bio of every team member. And the problem was on mobile then, or in between even more so, things would float funny and part of somebody's description would interrupt the photo of somebody else and it just didn't look good. So Dante taught me how to fix that. And that is with this little snippet of code, you would throw this in here and that would, what do you call that, clearing?
Yeah.
The division so that the next block of content is seen as separate content and it can't intrude on what's going on above it.
I know the meetup is about non-coding, right? But if you really want to address this, you need to focus on Canvas, right? Which is HTML5, and you can use metadata, meta tags, and reactive mindset for programming, which you can use tools that automatically do the layout for you. But the cool thing is that it will automatically size according to the device. So if it's a 70-inch screen or a little mobile device, that one page will float and size everything for you, pixel perfect.
Interesting. Can that be used on a common CMS?
Yep. It's all CSS, HTML5 driven. It's the Canvas element, and it's
So you can just put a little bit of logic in there. And
it'll
that'll
change.
take
Yeah,
care of-
what Dante's saying too is what'll happen is if you have a page that's 16 wide, you know, the ratio, right? Big screen, you're in a conference presentation, right? People can be looking at the content up there and looking at the same content on the mobile, but it'll all flow down on the page and you won't lose. You can actually drop out. You can drop out the noise, right? When you're looking at the mobile device and maintain exactly what the key elements that you want in your page without losing the fidelity, right? So if you're really gonna go professional, that's really the way you need to do it.
Yeah, and then on the HTML structure, like it's always the image first and then the text second. And this way when it goes to mobile, it stacks image, text, image, text, image, text.
Exactly.
And then through the styling, you decide if you want it to alternate.
You don't know how many times, you know, you go and you look at a page and you see it, and then you pull it up on your mobile, right? And it's like, oh my God, and you gotta go like this on
Yeah,
it.
because if you don't think of that all the way through, you end up with image, text, text, image, image, text, text, image, and that's not what you want, so.
And it's not, and it's not coding. It's not coding. It's simply understanding the content of your page and how you want it laid out, and understanding the devices. That's all. It's really not that difficult.
The other thing with this is like, let's say on your most narrow device width, usually for a number you're designing for like 320 pixels wide. So at 250, it leaves you like another 100 pixels. And so depending on how much text you have there, you may end up with an image and then text that's running down twice as long, or if that image was wider, you might end up with one word in each line, which you don't want. So you have to set media breakpoints so that it knows to go into a single column layout at some point. This is a very simplified version. I wasn't sure.
Well,
I
it
guess we
was
should get through this
intentionally
meetup.
being,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
so,
the other thing, this is here just so I can point out the difference. So this is for SEO. Title happens when you mouse over and then it shows a little tag with the title. You don't want title.
I actually don't
that-
like the title tag because it sometimes it gives away information you didn't want.
What's that?
Yeah, like stolen picture number 1.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's, a lot of times people will copy that over by accident, and it's something you want to definitely clean up in your projects.
So as far as SEO is concerned, the alt tag.
You just need the alt tag. Yeah, because if you mouse over, it looks sloppy. Like, you'll see a little tooltip show up with whatever you put in that title tag. And so unless that's intentional, that you want some kind of mouse over effect, yeah, you want to kill that.
So no title tag.
Right.
Use the alt tag.
Yep.
Sometimes I leave it there if the image file itself has been named strategically for SEO, but if you're uploading in mass, you generally are gonna get nonsense, you know, so, it just kinda depends on your purpose, but cleaning it out won't hurt you.
Especially if you've got like fake images for your testimonials, and it says person 1, person 2, person 3. Doesn't really sound very authentic.
Or maybe you just shouldn't have fake images for
That's
testimonials.
true.
You should have real
That's true.
testimonials, which means you should have a product that gets good real testimonials.
Well, but we always use real
With a brand new
testimonials, but
business, sometimes
sometimes the
people start
photo's
off,
not there.
you know, with what they have to, and you know.
Having
Statistically,
formatted
like
several
80% of them are fake.
today.
I hopefully your business doesn't stay in a state where that stays that way, but
I mean, we have one client, he's got a beautiful library of, it's a fishing site, and he's got great reviews. He also has a full stack of pros, they've been around forever, so every major fishing pro in the country and Canada uses their product, and so he's got a whole bunch of people. But none of the testimonials match those people, so the worst thing I could do would be to use that pro's face on somebody else's words. So we use somebody else's words and stock photos on the images. So
Do you
other,
find any SVG, how's the SVG coming along? Do you find anybody's using that in content yet?
I don't know about for content so much. I use it for logos, so that like the company logos looks very crisp. eCommerce doesn't have direct support for that, but I will custom code that in because you know, with phones especially, you know, it's the pixel ratio on that's like whatever, like 400 plus pixels per inch. So if you have that sharpness in there from an SVG file, like your logo's gonna look way sharper on a mobile device. Sometimes depending on the style of the logo, you can't really tell the difference between that and a JPEG, but sometimes it makes a huge difference.
Is an SVG a vector graphic
It
file?
is.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So it's a
And so-
web-friendly vector graphic
Yeah.
file?
Right, and
It
if
has
you,
full-on gradients, you can almost, you don't want it for photorealistic, but if you're looking at like structured diagrams or drawings, right, then it's perfect because it scales pixel perfect.
Yeah.
and the
it's
file size is
extremely
way
fast.
smaller,
That's
so it's
extremely
fast.
fast.
You have to be careful with that though. Like I generally do like a file size test and see like, you know, because there's just sometimes like complex vector images, not even photorealistic, like simpler than that are still like 300 kilobytes compared to like 20 kilobytes as a JPEG. So, you know, it depends on how it's designed, how many data
Well,
points are in there. So.
where it comes in handy today is not so much in you know, like what Dante's saying about the photorealistic images, you're not gonna beat that, the pixel, you know. But when you look at all of the artifacts on the page, the navigational elements, the icons, even the certain textual elements, right? Borders, lines, those visual graphic things that a lot of people today still use pixels for is stupid, because you can generate it in SVG, and the page is like snap, 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 and the only thing you gotta worry about then is breaking up those large pixel images and bringing them down efficiently through a caching mechanism, right? So I don't see a lot of people using it, but if you use it, you're gonna get a really crisp, fast page, and you think about it, the less you have to bring down creates the greater bandwidth that you can bring down the rich images, right? You see what I'm saying?
And sometimes people load up.
Why would
like-
you want to bring down a pixel image of a line? It's crazy, right? When you can
Well,
just draw it.
And a lot of people load up like Font Awesome, which
Yeah.
is like a whole stack of like SVG icons and stuff. But if you only need one or two of them, like I'll generally just load up one or two instead of trying to load up that whole library. And you know, last that I built, I think loaded in like
Another technique
1.2
too,
seconds.
are
Like,
sprite sheets. Like if you're gonna, like sizing of images, so you have a grid of your products, right? And then you click on the page, or you're gonna mouse over and you wanna get the bigger image, right? Well, you can literally create what's called a sprite sheet, so it's one image with 150 different small images, right? That are then displayed through your little JavaScript, right, on your page. So you're bringing down one image that consists of 150 images, right? So instead of going out, because what you don't realize is that when you have to go out and make a request, that's what kills you. Every time you have to go out like this, that's what kills the image. That's what kills the experience, the user experience, right? Because that latency of going out 150 times when you analyze that page is what kills you. So if you go out one time, bring it down, cache it, and then it's displayed, even though they might scroll, as they scroll through the page for the catalog little thumbnail images, right? You're not going out to that to the site every time and grabbing those. So that's a technique that you want to employ. Then when they mouse over or click on it, then you can go out one time and bring back that image, because obviously that's where the interest is.
I will say that is becoming less of an issue though with HTTP2. And if you're like on a secure site, which all these e-commerce sites are, they are bundling those requests.
Yeah.
That's soon like kind of becoming a thing in the
Well,
past.
once we get 5G, it ain't gonna matter, right? Because instead of 50 milliseconds,
Yeah.
it's 5 milliseconds, so.
You had a question?
No, I just think that this would be really good content for you to save for your class.
And if we get enough interest, we'll do an advanced class. We'd love to have you. You will end up in the code sometimes, and one of the first thing I'm gonna tell you is if you have to go into the code part, especially well, it's good practice even if you know what you're doing, because as he pointed out when he looked at my code, sometimes you miss a closing tag, which will break an entire page, or a quote mark. Copy the original code. I use Notepad, which is right there. Do not use Microsoft Word or Excel. It screws up your code. And it inserts a bunch of garbage code. So don't ever paste into Word, but you can paste into Notepad. It's not gonna add or subtract anything. Save it, and that way if you screw up the page, you can insert the original, or better yet, do your editing in Notepad. And then you have it, save an original anyway, and then make the copy, and then test it, and if you have to, replace it real quickly. Basically, I think I color-coded everything. So quote marks are required when you're working on style. So these are style codes, and basically what we've got here is the font weight says this is a normal text versus a bold. There are other codes there for different font weights. Color, usually 6 codes, but if all 6 numbers are the same, you can shortcut it with just 3. Margin, in this particular case, that's saying I want 20 pixels above this line of text. That's a lot, so this is obviously meant to be a header, and I just color code it so you could see what that really means. And again, the opening tag, which could be as simple as I showed you before with just an H3, you have to have a closing tag or it's not gonna work, or it'll mess up your entire view. But a lot of times if you're looking at a page and you're seeing oddness like bold and stuff where it doesn't belong, you're probably missing a closing tag. So this is where you can find it and look for it. Again, real common if you're copy, pasting, and editing to break somebody's code. So quote marks must be used, but this is what you'll see in HTML or through a text editor. This is what Microsoft does. See how there's a right and a left, and that's why they don't work. So.
Just want to point out one more thing. I mainly use Windows, so I don't know if it's true for Mac as well, but it might be. But when you save your code in a Notepad, by default, it goes to ASCII, and so you want to switch the format to UTF-8. Most of the times it will not make a difference, but every once in a while it does. And if you ever like go onto web server and look at the format of the files, they're all UTF-8. So just a little tip for when you're saving code locally.
Or you can use a web editor. So, but Notepad's free and easy, And I have a web editor and I use Notepad a lot, just because it's simple.
Some of the editors just highlight your code,
Which is nice, yeah.
So it's just like Notepad, but I forget which one it's called, but there's one that's just, all it does is highlight your code, just give you a visual on whether or not you closed your tags.
You know what that is? I know I've
It's a
seen it.
syntax highlighter. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of them
Oh,
that do
there's a
that.
bunch of them.
Notepad plus plus.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one's got plugins for every type of code, so, you know, if you're doing CSS.
I think that
or
link
whatever
one I
else.
gave you does that too.
Yeah, because you still need to tell it which type of code you're trying to write, so it can apply the right color coding for the syntax. But yeah, I've been coding in a plain Notepad with no highlighting since 1996, so I'm just kind of used to that.
So do's and don'ts, don't copy from Microsoft directly. If you do, you're going to have to clean it up. Do use an HTML editor if it's more than just a little bit of code. And I strongly suggest if you're trying to design an entire page, you do it offline, because there's nothing more frustrating than having your only copy of the code be on your WYSIWYG and then something goes wrong and it isn't saved. It harkens back to the old days before the undo button, where you'd be working on 5 hours worth of spreadsheet. It hadn't been saved and lost it all. So, you know, that's how you prevent those mistakes. If a page looks odd, the first thing I do is check for closing tags. Sometimes it's something else, but that's the most obvious first look. And again, if you've copied and pasted from Word or another site, the odds are good you have a bunch of garbage in there. If you're comfortable pulling it out, I recommend it. Sometimes that's a big project, which is why taking it offline can also make it a little bit easier to see it and understand it. One more comment on code. So when Google looks at SEO for a page, they're looking at pages that have a lot of useful content. If you have very little written descriptive word and a lot of code, Google deems the page as probably not important. So the cleaner your code is, the less garbage you have in it, the more likely your page is going to rank better. So that's also an SEO factor. Oh, and when we were talking about headers and alt images, I forgot to say that websites are supposed to be ADA compliant, and this is something that the alt description was designed expressly for, was for readers that visually impaired people use to tell them what's on a page. There is now a breed of ambulance chaser that runs around catching sites that aren't ADA compliant, which is almost everything in the US, and then they get into big trouble. I'm trying to remember who I talked to yesterday. Oh, she was working for one of the states, and that redo is costing them about $300,000 because the state site wasn't ADA compliant. We have a client who just spent 35 grand, and I forgot what he paid. It's pure extortion. They basically come in, and I've seen it for supplement sites, if you're selling supplements. I worked for Genesis Today when the FDA and the FTC fined them $9 million for violating the legal ways you can market supplements. They tend to they go where the money is. But we had another client, no sooner did I take her on for some marketing assistance, I said, by the way, your site's not gonna be compliant. You probably should start thinking about changing the way you write about your product, because you're gonna get into trouble. And about 3 weeks later, it cost them $60,000 is what the lawyer wanted to go away. So, and they had to redo all their content and all their videos and things. So, yeah, be aware. We're still doing the homework on what constitutes ADA compliance. So we may come back at our clients in the not so distant future and say, we recommend these changes. At this point, we're handling the obvious stuff like alt descriptions right
Yeah,
now.
once they do that, then they'll attack the color.
Yeah, some of what they've done doesn't make a ton of sense.
Part of what you're talking about with the 501c standard is also for colorblind.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
The other thing I want to point out real quick is if you mess up some code and it seems like it's destroying your whole page, instead of panicking, first go Google HTML checker, CSS checker, JavaScript checker, whatever it is, and they just point out, oh, you forgot a bracket or semicolon or something, and and it may just work after that.
Isn't there a
And so-
Chrome plugin for that? Isn't there like a
Probably.
Chrome
I'm sure there is, yeah, yeah,
Probably. There's a Chrome plugin for
for
everything.
everything, yeah, that's why I say it like that, I'm
Fair.
like, probably.
I think,
I try not to have too many plugins on Chrome.
And if you're using SEMrush, they have a fun little plugin that I'm enamored of called the Writing Assistant. So you can go into SEMrush. First you do your research to figure out what keywords you're aiming for. And I'm giving away secrets knowing there are competitors in the room. But I figure I have a strategy for what keywords I want to write about. Then I use their tool to produce a template. And the template does a number of things, including telling you what semantic language you should probably have on the page, because what the top 10 pages that rank for that word include these languages. And then you send it over to Google Docs, and if you type within Google Docs, it scores you along the way. So, and I have found content written that way tends to do extremely well. So we do follow up with some backlink campaigns to help make sure everybody sees it. But that combination drove a 134% increase in one of our clients last year.
Nice.
So, and we also do some other little magic. I'm not going to,
Crafty.
but yeah, I love it. It works so well. It was like ooh 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 ooh. Ooh. But anyway, that's a great way to write if you're doing your own writing, and it's super simple to use. And I think it's $79 a month to use SEMrush. Yeah, it's nominal. It's certainly cheaper than hiring somebody to do it.
What, I'm hard to hear, what is that, STM?
SEM, letter S, Edward, Mary, Rush, like
SEM.
that band.
Okay, SEM, yeah, I love Rush. Just didn't get the first part, SEM, Sam, Edward, Mark.
Search engine marketing. They
Oh, there you
also
go, okay.
offer some PPC intelligence.
.com, right?
Yes. Questions
What's your favorite shopping site?
for actual shopping or for the technology?
Both, now that you mention it.
You know, I'm in love with Chewy. I don't buy there as often as I should, but in terms of what makes a great e-commerce company and a great customer experience, everything is how well your customers are served. I've spent the last 2 weeks fighting with Mercedes-Benz because they cheapened their upholstery. I have had several in a row. I have bought from Mercedes at Georgetown 3 vehicles in the last 5 years. Typically, I've had them surprise and delight me with excellent service in the past. But in this case, on a car I've had 13 months, the upholstery is cracking because they put in some garbage, and they were trying to tell me that they'd do me a favor by only charging me for half price to replace that. I won the argument today, but they've probably lost me. They've probably lost me as a customer because, you know, sorry. I said to him, I said, you know, I could buy Honda. The upholstery wouldn't be cracking at 54,000 miles.
Really? So Chewy, you like the UX?
I like, well, you just saw one of their product pages. That's a more classic page, but it's still feature rich. What I didn't show you was the bottom where they talk about the brand, which helps instill trust if this is a brand you don't know. Their return policy, and I think we suggested a more B2B version for your site. If you've got an issue, just let us know. We want you happy. So they're not saying it's 30 days, they're not saying it's 90 days, they're not even saying if they're gonna take it back. Which they actually, I've shared it in one of my How to Write a Great Return Policy presentations, which is now up on YouTube. I'm lousy at presentations, but I generally give some pretty good information. I'm a wiener lover. I have dachshunds. I have dachshund t-shirts. I'm a member of about half a dozen dachshund Facebook groups. And not that I have time much anymore, but one day somebody published a little snippet from a story they had seen elsewhere. And basically her brother-in-law had lost their 2 dogs the same weekend. Talk about terrible. And come Tuesday, 2 40-pound bags of dog food showed up.
Oh, awesome.
So they called Chewy's or wrote to Chewy's and said, hey, we'd like to return the dog food. They told their story. And Chewy's turned around and said, I tell you what, we're about to issue a full refund. We're so sorry for your loss. we're issuing that immediately, but what we'd love for you to do is to donate the food to a dog shelter. Okay, now this makes business sense, because those,
Yeah.
shipping those bags back probably
Yeah.
isn't economically
Yeah.
worth it. They're 80 pounds, that's a
Right.
heavy
I don't
shipment.
know if you can resell it once.
I don't know, but the idea of
It's smart.
donating it to
Either
the
way, it's
shelter
smart.
was wonderful.
Yeah.
And then they turned around and sent a condolence card.
Oh, nice.
You know, so when you talk
Customer
about
service.
customer experience, store owners writing handwritten mailed thank you notes, there's a lot of things you can do that help somebody, you know, I'm
Do they
here.
display that? Did they actually surface that?
Um,
Handwritten notes?
I know I've received them.
No, I
You
mean
know-
on the site.
No, they don't show off that they do this. This is a surprise and delight, which
They're
is a
missing
great
that-
way
they're
to
missing
keep your
that,
customers
though,
happy.
because that's an authentic experience.
It gets out, it could even just,
It's all over
I
Reddit.
mean, word of mouth and Reddit, it really does get out. If you constantly treat your customers the way you'd wanna be treated,
Right.
it will get out.
I
It will have
believe
an
that.
effect on your business.
If you trumpet your altruism, I think it stops being altruism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, I think you don't even have to do it.
And to me, as I compare the two experiences, here was, you know, probably $120 in dog food and they did the right thing. And here's a $50,000 car and I had to fight with them and basically,
That's crazy.
actually I used my expertise because their certified pre-owned program rocks, or used to. Which is why I've bought several in a row, and I've been all over Quora talking about it, and my positive reviews have been read tens of thousands of times, and I can use that exact same power to not just take it back, but totally talk genuinely and authentically about my negative experience. So I'm probably gonna get an Audi next time.
And they have a great dealership, very good.
The one in off,
The North,
Audi.
Austin Audi dealers.
well, I still have a few more years, but yeah, unless I get mad, because I threaten that too.
What kind of software do you guys use to A/B test if you're gonna make a change on a product detail page?
Google Optimize,
Oh, yeah?
yeah.
It's actually super easy to use and free.
Yeah, it's funny how many people use Optimizely and yet Google's free. I don't know, we actually don't do this stuff, I don't think compete with you guys, but we'll, you know, if we see a need for a PDP to improve, we're asking clients, oh, can you A/B test this? And, you know, a lot of them just can't, they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on ads, and they can't invest in however much it costs to do an audit, get their site fixed.
You
You
just
know-
need to know some basic coding to A/B test something, you know, because if you're going to Google Optimize and you're like, well, I want to change the color of this, you still need to be able to grab the class name of that button, modify the color, and give it that condition, you know, so, I think for a lot of times the store owners just don't have the skills to do that.
Yeah, it's true.
As
But they
a-
can hire a developer.
They can
who's
hire a
dedicated to
developer,
that,
you can do
they're
that in
like-
about 5 minutes,
Yeah.
but yeah.
One of the things
Do you guys
that,
do that? Would you guys
Yeah,
manage the Google
absolutely.
experiments for clients?
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was this one client we did it for, Carabit, you know, they had like 2 tabs, one with the specs and the other one with the product description.
Oh, yeah.
The product description is definitely kind of hypes you up, you
Mhm.
know, and kind of helps you picture being a total badass if you bought this $300 knife. And you would think when buying something that expensive that you'd be more concerned about the technical specs of all of it.
Sure.
So we A/B tested it.
Yeah.
And so if it defaulted to the description, it was like doing like twice as good as then
Wow.
defaulting to the
See,
technical
that's
specs.
a perfect case study, I think, and if you guys do something like this again, I think showing you examples like that, because it really gets people thinking about, oh, what should I be talking about in my specific store? That's the kind of stuff I really
I
want to
will
see.
also say that if you have a boss that's constantly coming to you with harebrained ideas,
Yeah, be able to A/B test them. It's
you
great.
never say no.
Yeah.
You just say, let's test it. And sometimes you're
Or if
wrong,
you're the harebrained
sometimes
person.
they're actually right. Sometimes they're actually
It's
right.
true.
So you don't have to put any ego in it, you don't have to hurt anybody's feelings, just say, let's test it. You know, so the hard part sometimes is in the build, establishing the baseline.
Testing's continuous.
Yeah, well, if you have enough traffic, the testing happens, you're always looking for have an entire testing
Forever.
team.
Yeah,
Every once in a while you get lucky, you'll catch Amazon testing. It's kind of fun when you can spot it, because sometimes you don't realize that that's what they're doing. And some of those tests have been awful, but the fact that they're willing to test and constantly change and you know, I mean, it's all about making more money.
One word or phrase can mean 10% to 7% change.
The biggest thing I ever saw was we had one client who was initially insisting on having a video automatically play on their homepage. Their bounce rate was through the roof, like 60%.
Yeah.
We stopped it from automatically playing, it dropped down to like 2%.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, here's the data. Would you like to have it not autoplay? You know?
So can you test stuff like that in Google Website Optimizer? Because I feel like all the content has to be.
Well, that's more of a Google Analytics thing where you can just tell by watching it, you know, but.
No, I mean in terms of A/B testing, whether it autoplays or not.
Oh, that, yeah, I mean, you could pretty much test anything.
But it's still loading the video, even if it's not autoplaying.
Yeah, but that's
Right,
okay.
But.
Oh, it wasn't the
the,
load time, it was just the annoyance of.
Well, to be more specific, this was an addiction treatment center, so imagine being at work, flipping to that page and having everybody around you hear what's
Oh,
playing.
with audio?
Yeah, that's great.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like, we recommend that we not have it do that.
Jeez, yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You would think that sites like that would want to even be visually a little bit more
Yeah,
subdued.
yeah.
Tired of your STD?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, we did use very common colors for that site, that's pretty useful.
so, anyway, yeah,
Great, well, thank you so much, that was great.
thank you guys. Now, sorry, no beer.
What's his face on your cooler?
Yeah, yeah,
When's he bringing it back?
I don't know. I'll tell him he has to
So
buy
if you were
us.
gonna build an e-com site, what would you go for? What would you use?
So we try to be platform agnostic and build based on